Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talking Star Wars EU. Today, I'm joined by a very good friend of mine who, if you've watched the channel for a while, you should recognize. I'm joined by Greyholme Winterblade, also known on Discord as Random Anonymous Guy. Greyholme has been on the channel several times to talk about the expanding universe. The first thing he appeared on was a year ago when we talked about the Essential Legends collection covers. And he's appeared several other times on videos related to foreign Star Wars Expanded Universe covers, Essential Legends collection covers. He was on my 500 sub celebration stream, and so we've really had a fun time getting to talk on all of these live streams over the years. And so today we're going to talk about how Greyholme got into the Star Wars Expanded Universe. How are you today, man?
Pretty good.
Pretty good sounds pretty good. So when we do this, the first question that I usually ask of all of the people who I've had on this series is, what is your first memory of Star Wars? And really, how did you first get into Star Wars in general?
Okay. So my first memory, I think, was watching A New Hope for the first time. And that was the first Star Wars movie I watched. So my dad was a rather big original trilogy fan, less of a prequel fan, but, well, I'll forgive him that one. He at least let me watch them. So I think I must have been 6, or maybe 7. It was shortly after I had read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which was when I really started to get into fantasy and
Very nice.
reading and any pop culture related thing in general, really. So I was first introduced to Lord of the Rings, second to Star Wars. So I watched the original trilogy, and over the next few years, gradually watched all the prequels. I think it took a while before I watched Revenge of the Sith because of the burning scene in Mustafar and whatnot.
Right.
I think I was 9 then, but I watched the original trilogy all within like a month or less, and I have very fond memories of it.
About what age were you when you watched the original trilogy?
Yeah, I think 6 or 7, something like that.
So over like a 2-ish year period, you consumed all of the original 6 Star Wars films?
No, I watched Revenge of the Sith when I was 9, I think. So a bit more than that, but yeah, it wasn't too long a period. And I watched The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones probably like less than a year after I finished the originals.
And did you instantaneously just really take to the universe that you saw presented there?
Yes, absolutely. I admit that I was pretty scared by Empire Strikes Back and therefore liked A New Hope more. At the time of my first watching, anyway, and maybe a few years after that. But I really like the universe. I think I have never really lost a love for Star Wars. Like I have other stuff before, but I've always liked Star Wars and I've never stopped.
And has it been the same for The Hobbit / Lord of the Rings for Middle
Oh yes,
Earth?
absolutely. There's a certain magic which was somehow captured by both Tolkien and Lucas, which I don't think anyone else has ever been able to fully duplicate. They're both very different works, but
You think that's due to the imagination of the world that's presented there?
I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that people who know me know that I like fantasy a lot more than science fiction, and also consider Star Wars to be more space fantasy dressed up as science fiction than the other way around.
Yes.
And I am firmly of the opinion that with fantasy, you get this strange phenomena where you're well, some people call it escapism, but I think it goes a bit further than that. Um, I think fantasy speaks to people.
Mm.
It's like being told something in a different way, but being told it in a different way allows you to understand it better or from a new perspective
Hmm.
that you can't really get anywhere else. It's not like a different person's perspective as much as just a different way of explaining this thing.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's especially true in the really deep and impactful works of fantasy. So, for instance, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. I'd also add a few others like The Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
And you get these, I guess, truths of the universe,
Yep.
or different concepts, different struggles of humanity explained to you in a different way. Sometimes made more obvious, like you could have what would otherwise be metaphor, literal in this fantasy universe, but it has a way of taking you away from the world, as in Earth, and allowing you to view this thing while foregoing your previous perspectives, foregoing your previous biases, and just looking at everything afresh.
Yeah.
And well, you get that a lot through the world because the world is what takes you away to begin with.
Yep. And so, as you were taken away by the world of Star Wars, you mentioned that you enjoyed A New Hope more than Empire. What was your favorite as you were a kid going through both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy? What was your favorite film there?
Originally, it was A New Hope because I felt that it did the most in some ways. And I think it was at least partially because I got really scared subconsciously by some bits in Empire.
Right.
Like I think was it no So Uncivilized, or maybe Rick Worley, both on YouTube, have gone into these videos explaining some of the magical things that George Lucas did. And a lot of his inversions, like how Bespin is a cloud city, so it's all heavenly, but then you have the carbon freeze chamber, which is all red like hell.
Yeah.
Among many other inversions, I'm pretty sure this is So Uncivilized. But I mean, you can say these things, and you might even notice them, but it genuinely had a pretty big impact on me as a kid, though I didn't realize it back then.
Stuff
I
like
genuinely felt scared, I think, looking back anyway, by the carbon freeze scene, especially of all the music and
yeah,
that ominous boom when the carbonite slab just falls on the ground.
oh yeah,
Stuff
for
like
sure.
that.
And probably stuff like the scene on Dagobah where Luke confronts Vader,
yeah.
but it's actually him.
That creeped me out back in the day.
Oh yeah,
I have a very different perspective on it now, of course. Empire is my top at the moment, followed by Revenge of the Sith.
nice.
Very close. I rank Empire slightly higher. But in any case, back then, a lot of things in Empire really scared me, but the thing is, I didn't know that I was being scared, if that makes sense. It was just, it pulled me in so fully. And while being, well, I think that kids' content shouldn't scare kids too much.
Yeah.
And I think that Empire is a masterclass in that. It scared me without me knowing that I was scared.
It stuck with you.
Yeah, it really stuck with me. And anything that I've seen after that, trying to bring up concepts like confronting one's literal shadow, Wizard of Mercy, never quite managed to pull it off the same way
as Empire.
nearly as well. It never had that same impact.
Yeah.
Now, I've been reading some Young lately, or about Young, but mostly because Stover liked him so much that I
Mm.
just had to see what was going on with this guy. And he came up with this concept called the shadow, which is sort of like the evil part of your psyche, to grossly
Right.
oversimplify it. So you see the elements of this being brought in stuff like Revenge of the Sith.
Yep.
I think the novel by Stover. But Young inspired a fellow called Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell wrote a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces, which a certain nerd called George Lucas picked up and absolutely loved. So a lot of Star Wars was taken from the hero's journey as established by Campbell,
Right.
and in turn, the New Jedi Order authors really went nuts with the Joseph Campbell stuff as well. So I think Star Wars manages to capture that these archetypal elements of quintessential storytelling, of like pure myth, better
sure.
than anything else I've really seen. Like, okay, Tolkien was trying to make this mythology for England with Lord of the Rings, and I get that. I completely appreciate it. And it's one of my favorite books. But Star Wars manages to create this not historical myth like what Lord of the Rings is, but it created a cultural myth, and it manages to explore all these archetypes that Young and Campbell found in all these different mythologies all over the world. And Young thought, well, we're also within the psyche. I think Star Wars manages to capture this better than anything else, regardless of however hard they try. Again, with diversity.
Yeah, definitely. So you like this universe with Star Wars quite a lot. You were taken with it as a kid. You enjoyed all the films. What was the first indication to you that there was more than just movie to the mythos of Star Wars? When did you first become aware of the concept of an expanded universe, which might not have even been how you discovered it? You might have just discovered it as a part of Star Wars rather than its own entity with the expanded universe. But when was your first introduction, your first moment being aware that there was more to Star Wars than just the films?
No, this is pretty far back, so I can't remember it as well as I would like to, and so I have a bunch of different theories about how this happened. But my main theory, and I'm pretty sure that these were the books in question, was that I went to the National Library, and we have a lot of National Library outlets here, but I went to one of them and was just searching for books, and I got the also I thought at the time brilliant idea of searching for Star Wars books. And I
Right.
found the Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson. And I gradually found more stuff, a lot more books, mostly Bantam era, but I think I found a bunch of prequel era stuff as well, and a lot of post Return of the post Bantam era stuff. So
At about what age would this
random
have
New
been?
Jedi Order books. Same year or the year after I saw the original trilogy.
So probably just around the
7
same
or
time
8.
that you were watching the prequels?
Yeah, so I was 7 or 8 years old, and I started finding all these books in libraries that said Star Wars in them. And being a dumb kid, I read them all out of order. So while I read the Jedi Academy trilogy in, I think, some semblance of an order, I proceeded to read random New Jedi Order, Legacy of the Force, and eventually Fate of the Jedi books in no order whatsoever. I hopped around nonsensically because I didn't bother checking the timeline at the start of every book and didn't want to copy it out and make a list because I was a lazy, stupid kid. The other theory, though, is that my dad showed me KOTOR on his iPad and then let me play it, by which he really initially meant make character, I'll play it for you. But after a few rounds, I eventually started doing it myself.
So your dad played Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah, he never played the second one, which was sad. but he did play the first one a lot on his old PC back in the day. And when they got the iPad release out, he bought it. So I've never played PC KOTOR, or KOTOR 2 for that matter, but I have played the iPad version of both quite a lot. So there's a good chance that KOTOR was what started me out, but I think the Jedi Academy trilogy, or at least some Bantam book, had a bigger chance.
And did you immediately love KOTOR?
Oh yeah, I loved it, absolutely.
And so you were sort of reading these books with literary whiplash, and then you were introduced to KOTOR on an iPad. And so were
Yes.
these concepts just further Star Wars to you at the time?
Yes. So I saw Star Wars in it. I accepted it. It was
So
Star Wars.
there was absolutely no question that the events that you were reading about or playing in the game, they unequivocally happened.
The game specifically, no, but I checked Wikipedia and found out that all the light side stuff was just taken to be canon, so I went with that.
So you accepted it as having happened.
Yes, the books I definitely accepted as having happened.
That's
The
so
game,
cool.
I think I left it up to like twice because there's no like fixed way that you should have played the game, so I just trusted Wikipedia. But for the books, I just took it as, oh yeah, they must have happened. Of course. What else would have happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there was never like a separation between the expanded universe and Star Wars from the get go.
No, the expanded universe, all Star Wars is Star Wars.
It was one entity.
Yeah. I loved it all because it was Star Wars, like
Yeah.
Return of the Jedi, like the Legacy of the Force. Don't kill me. So on and so forth. I like them all because they were Star Wars.
When did you become aware that they were sort of under a separate umbrella of sorts with this concerted effort of the Star Wars expanded universe?
Well, I watched a movie called The Force Awakens and came
Oh,
extremely confused as to what had happened. Mostly because I thought that I'd be seeing characters who I didn't see, and hearing about things which I didn't hear about. And then I found out that I found that the Disney bought Silver World. I didn't know what exactly they had done beyond start to make a movie. And then my world started to fall apart. And I think before I watched The Last Jedi, maybe a year or two, I had stopped reading Star Wars books and favorite fantasy books. It's just that I read fantasy books and gradually didn't read Star Wars books. Not consciously,
right.
but I just didn't feel as motivated or invested because I had other stuff to read. So
Of
I set
course.
Star Wars
Yeah.
aside. And the movie situation is not helping.
So
Really,
you were expecting to see characters from the New Jedi Order era, from the
yes,
New
I
Republic
was.
era.
Yep. I
And
fully expected to see Jason and Jaina and Anakin in The Force Awakens.
and you were confused, and were you disappointed in that as well?
Oh yes, I had no idea what to think.
So you were not. It can safely be said that you weren't enamored in 2015 when you saw The Force Awakens.
I was more confused than anything, but I got less and less enamored. Especially maybe 2 months or 3 months, or at least half a year after I'd seen The Last Jedi, it all fell apart. I just was done.
Right.
And I watched The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh yeah.
I think a few months later, I started reading the EU again. Surprise, surprise. I
Yeah.
think that's the best thing that movie did. It brought people back to the expanded universe, or brought people to the expanded universe.
Yeah. And that's sort of with the Disney sequels, sort of the distinction has been made to the expanded universe. So this is when you became aware that the expanded universe was its own entity through
Yeah.
The Force Awakens having varying content than what you were expecting.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so when did you get back into the expanded universe side of things in kind of a more concerted way than just picking up a couple novels here and there?
A few months after the West Skywalker, I think it was around the start of COVID. I think it was around lockdown. We had a few months of lockdown, at least two, I think. Um, and I decided to read some books again. And so I realized that I had these books which had been given to my brother as a Christmas present with Star Wars in, and he never bothered reading them. Um, these books, I think there were two, or maybe three. I can't remember if it was the full trilogy, but they happen to be called the Thrawn trilogy, and I'd never read them before
Ah,
because for some reason the libraries here don't replenish books after they take them out. So if you want to find a book that was released a long time ago, like maybe even 6 years ago, I can't find them in in the national libraries here, except maybe in ebook form because they don't buy a new copy even if it's still in print, which I find very irritating now. But yeah, so I read the Thrawn trilogy, and realized that I could just not be stupid like that in myself and check the timeline. So I read certain books in the Bantam era. Let me see if I can remember which. So in 2020, I started to read all over again the Jedi Academy trilogy, The Courtship of Princess Leia, Tatooine Ghost, the Callister trilogy. I think Planet of Twilight was the first time. The Crystal Star, marvelous. The Hand of Thrawn duology, Survivor's Quest, A New Jedi Order, and eventually I circled back. I read I Jedi at some point, and then at another point, I think this was 2021, no, 2022, last year. I wound up reading Truce at Bakura, Shadows of Mindor, and all of X-Wing, and realized that I may as well start a Bantam read.
very nice.
Partial read. So here I am in New Jedi Order once more.
And so, delving back into the expanded universe after having a little bit of prior knowledge to it, after the sequels, how much more did you enjoy it than when you'd only been reading bits and pieces before? And did you still read it with the mindset that this was Star Wars that you were reading?
Oh yeah. So I'll answer the second bit first because it's easier. Yes, absolutely. I took it as Star Wars because it felt so much better. Now I admit that I was slightly enamored of Dave Filoni initially because he seemed like a better alternative, but I eventually turned away from this and had a kickback reaction against TCW shortly after. I don't think people I know who like Star Wars and have vague knowledge of the expanded universe are exactly very happy with me when I start going off about my thoughts on Dave Filoni and television shows. As to the first one, yeah, I read it with much deeper appreciation, I think, because I was reading it in chronological order. That's for one, and for another, I actually read the whole series this time. Well, mostly New Jedi Order. I read the whole thing in order, so I got the full narrative. And of course, I was older, so I appreciated some of them a lot more. That said, I developed a distaste for some of them. I think you know which ones I'm talking about.
Yes.
Children of Jedi and the, well, Benningverse. Especially Darkness. It took me a very long time to beat Darkness.
So the numerous works by Troy Denning from Darkness, Legacy of the Force, Fate of the Jedi,
Yes.
were not
Yeah.
enjoyed.
No. I think it took me 4 months to read the first 7 chapters of Betrayal because I now remembered what was coming and didn't want to do it, having a very different perspective on it by this point. Sorry.
So you remembered bits and pieces from when you'd read
Yeah.
it when you were younger.
Yeah. So this especially triggered with books that I remembered or was starting to remember I had read. So, for instance, if I couldn't remember if I'd read the Hand of Thrawn duology before, but some bits seemed familiar. So I'm
Right.
still not sure if I had read it before. But
Or
some
maybe
bits
just a
really
summary somewhere?
familiar. Yeah, possibly. I don't think so. Because I seem to remember some things which wouldn't have been in Wikipedia.
Right.
And this was especially interesting with iJedi. Because iJedi, as most people know, takes the first half is basically the Jedi Academy trilogy from
Yeah.
Corin Horn's retrofitted perspective. Now, I really like the iJedi. Now, my perspective on the Jedi Academy trilogy has basically gone down with each reread. Sorry, again. But back when I still really liked the Jedi Academy trilogy, at least comparatively to now, I read iJedi and it seemed really familiar, but also so new. And so that first read of iJedi was one of the most enjoyable I ever had for a Star Wars book because it gave me that sense of familiarity. So it's like my lost childhood, it's come back to me. It also gave me a lot of new stuff. And Stackpole does a lot of world building, especially with the Jedi in iJedi. Surprising for an author who like rose to fame by writing quote Top Gun in space unquote books. But
Yeah.
Stackpole does Jedi stuff really well, as evident in iJedi and Dark Tide. So I really
Yes.
enjoy a lot of the additions Stackpole made, even to the Jedi Academy trilogy parts, which I think a lot of people find controversial,
Yeah.
to say the least.
So as you were going through all of this, what became your favorite or your couple of favorites from the expanded universe as you were reading back through these
Ooh.
novels?
From the stuff that I'd already read, or just anything?
From the stuff that you'd already read and from the stuff that was new as well.
Okay, so I remember reading a vandalized library copy of Revenge of the Sith hardback many years ago. And I initially didn't really remember I had, but then eventually it came back to me. I remembered the cover, I remembered some bits and pieces of it. I remember the vandalism with, I think, some pens and highlighters that gone through the first act, the Battle of Coruscant, and there were some tears here and there. It was surprisingly bad for a library copy because normally they pick up on these things over here. But a phenomenon I've discovered in Matthew Silver books is that with every reread, it just gets so much better.
Oh yeah.
To the point where, when I first did Chatterpoint, I immediately went. My first reaction after finishing it was, I need to reread this book, which I did at least a year or so later, maybe slightly less, and enjoyed it significantly more.
Yeah.
Happens with every Silver book. I've never not had this happen. But this was really the case with Revenge of the Sith, and it skyrocketed up the ranks when I reread it because it blew me away so much. Every time, actually. I think that book probably captures the spirit of Star Wars, like the condensed everything in Star Wars better than maybe any other single book.
So it sounds like Stover's work in all of its forms were some of your favorites.
Oh yes. As far as new stuff, I think iJedi is up there. I think Kenobi is up there. Plagueis certainly. Yoda Dark Rendezvous. The X-Wing books. I hadn't read any of these before, I think. And and Junior Jedi Knights. That was it. That was an especial outstanding. So the Jude Watson stuff and Young Jedi Knights are also good. I find Junior Jedi Knights the best YA series.
Interesting.
I'll say
Better
that
than
any
Jude
day.
Watson stuff.
Yes, I enjoy Junior Jedi Knights better than Jude Watson stuff.
Wow.
Partially aided and abetted by Age of Victory, because I
Oh yeah.
read Age of Victory before Junior Jedi Knights.
So partially aided by what was to come.
Yes. So in I think 2020, which is when I came back to the EU, I read okay, so prior to Junior Jedi Knights, I had read Age of Victory. And well okay, you know what, the best way I can summarize this is to quote Matt Wilkins. They were kids.
Yes. Yes, indeed they were. And it is tragic to read sort of the outcome.
Yeah. Now I know that people say that you should read Junior Jedi Knights before Age of Victory, but I think that in this case you can actually read it either way because they make each other better.
They're complementary.
Yes, they make each other better by such a significant margin. So in 2021, I was reading. Yeah, it was just all the YA stuff.
Right.
Except maybe Galaxy of Fear and some of the prequel, like episode 1 adventures and stuff like that. I didn't read those, but I read the quote unquote mainstream YA stuff.
The Watson
including including a reread of Rebel Force, which I had also read while I was a kid.
Which is pretty much a part of the Watsonverse.
We count it as the Watsonverse, regardless of whatever the various parties involved all say. So yeah, I found Junior Jedi Knights the best out of all of them. Certainly aided and abetted by Age of Victory, but not without its own merit.
Yeah, and presumably you enjoyed Young Jedi Knights as well.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed Young Jedi Knights.
Anderson's best work, in your opinion?
At the time, I thought Darksaber might have been. No, I didn't actually. Never mind. I maintain that Redemption is the best book.
Oh, Tales of the Jedi Redemption, of course. Yeah,
easily top book. Because I find there's only one thing which I don't really like as much in Redemption, which is mostly Hoggin. Now I know that Matt had some sort of really weird kickback reaction to Hoggin in his and absolutely hated Redemption in his reread.
Yes.
That was certainly an incident of all time. And I don't feel that level of feeling, and I know that it was intentional on Kevin J. Anderson's part, and maybe even dramatically ironic. But I think that Ulick could have had it better, which was probably the point. But I have a slight issue with Hoggin. I accept it. I happily accept it. But I have maybe a small issue with Hoggin. Young Jedi Knights, I think it has less highs than Redemption because Redemption has this emotional gut punch.
Yeah.
Young Jedi Knights has nice scenes, but they don't impact you nearly as much, at least in my opinion. And Young Jedi Knights, being a lot longer, has more room to nitpick as of my latest read. Oops.
Gotcha.
It was still good. It was still enjoyable, but I found a few small things to nitpick at. So I like Redemption more.
With the main Watson verse, what is your favorite of Jedi Apprentice, Jedi Quest, Last of the Jedi?
Jedi Apprentice easily. I think Last of the Jedi. I still haven't finished it. I read maybe the first half or slightly less, and it took me a really long time. I just did. I couldn't get invested in Ferris. While Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's adventures were just addictive. Jedi Quest was good. It was at least A tier, but Jedi Apprentice is somehow better. I'm not sure how to describe it. Maybe it's just because Jedi Quest lives off Jedi Apprentice. but Jedi Apprentice introduced so much, and it had a certain quality which I can't really describe.
Yeah.
And it is probably helped by the era that it's about, and the characters that it's about, because you don't really get that much before the Phantom Menace beyond great exceptions like Cloak of Deception, Plagueis, more Shadowhunter, etc. But there's just a special quality about Jedi Apprentice where you
For
have
sure.
Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan doing all these things.
Do you think that you were surprised reading through the Expanded Universe Young Reader stuff, how high quality it was?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I personally think it's probably some of the most high quality young adult stuff ever written.
No question. The only thing that I would probably say is better is a book called Nobody's Son by Sean Stewart, which for some reason is YA, even though it really shouldn't be. But you know what? Okay, I'll take it. Whatever. It won awards in that category. Who am I to deny that? But if I compare some things which I have an increasing loathing for over the years, including controversially Percy Jackson and the other Rick Riordan stuff, as well as, to the surprise and horror of many, Harry Potter. Yeah, I really don't like either of those.
Neither do I.
You cannot speak of the Star Wars YA stuff in the same breath as any of those, or even the
You
same.
would say they're just simply a lot better.
Yeah, like there's no comparison.
Yep. I agree.
You cannot compare the two. I know people who really like Harry Potter. I'm still not too sure why. I only liked it at some point, but I really don't like them now.
Right. And
okay,
same for
if you
the
count
Rick Riordan stuff then?
Yeah, same for that. Maybe more so. I dislike the impact of Rick Riordan's works a lot more than I dislike the impact of Harry Potter.
Right.
Which is surprising, but yeah. The only other books which I would say are probably better than the Star Wars YA stuff, if you count them as YA, because many wouldn't, are The Hobbit and Narnia.
Right. Yep.
Yes, they were written. Okay, yes, Narnia is about children, and yes, The Hobbit was written for children, but they're on a different level.
Yeah.
I just don't see it as I don't see them as YA, but maybe it's just me.
Maybe children were smarter back when they were written.
Probably, almost certainly true.
So you mentioned Tales of the Jedi Redemption. When did you start to get into the Star Wars Expanded Universe in comic book format?
I think it was after my return. So sometime.
So you weren't aware of the comics. You weren't aware of the comics before your return after Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, sorry. No, I read one graphic novel. It was the Republic comics. It included
very
Obsession. Nice. Whichever Dark Horse graphic novel omnibus included Obsession.
One of the Clone Wars ones.
Yeah, I read that one.
Did you enjoy it?
Yes, I enjoyed it a lot.
Very nice.
And it confused me in the context of TCW, which I have since utterly rejected.
Yes.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that back then. But I never really got a chance to read many comics because they don't really have much of a comic book industry here. That's number one. Number two, I think I was discouraged from reading comics by some people.
Yes.
Something to do with bad language, which didn't apply to the Star Wars comics, but it was a blanket rule for comics. And so, well, I followed it like a good child.
Right.
But
since then have read Acts of Cain.
Yes. Since then have read Acts of Cain. Which is so much more violent. Anyway, as far as comics go,
basically sounds like it's almost like how people conceive their notion of what comics are.
No, it's worse. It's much worse. I think Marcel described Game of Thrones as having nothing on Acts of Cain in terms of brutality and other things. Marcel, if I misquoted you, correct me. Sorry, but I'm pretty sure you said that at one point when I asked. I haven't read Martin yet, so anyway, I can't compare it myself. But as far as comics go, I read them. I started reading some of the Star Wars ones in must have been 2020 or 2021. I think it was Dark Empire.
Oh yeah, what did you think
I
of
think
it?
I started. I found it interesting. I wasn't too sure what to feel, especially post Rise of Skywalker, which I think did a lot of harm to Dark Empire. The
Yeah,
same way The Force Awakens did a lot of harm to Legacy of the Force.
right.
Though I have a much higher impression of Dark Empire than I do Legacy
Oh,
of the Force, as you
yeah.
know.
No, some people take Dark Empire over the Thrawn trilogy. What do you think of that? Because it was kind
I
of a
meant
spiritual successor.
I maintain that Dark Empire, especially Dark Empire 1 is an infinitely better episode 7 than the Thrawn trilogy,
Wow.
Heir to the Empire. That said, the true episode 7 should be Vector Prime and Dark Tide. End of story.
Yes.
The end. You don't need to have Dark Empire 1 or Heir to the Empire when you have those three books as episode 7.
Definitely.
However you split it up, whatever. Those three books are much better successor. But I will say that I agree with Veach in his criticisms of Heir to the Empire as uncinematic, and think that Dark Empire was a better successor to the original trilogy. That said,
Yes.
I still have mixed thoughts on Palpatine
Returning.
and Luke falling to the dark side. I
Yes.
think if people could give me an argument that Luke did not fall to the dark side, I would accept it. But I would also be able to accept arguments that Luke momentarily brushed with the dark side and pulled an Ulick.
I think that's kind of what we're led to
Which I
believe.
think, that's what future authors took.
For
So
in New Jedi Order and stuff like that, they took it as more of
yeah,
a brush.
yeah, and actually before that, especially in Hand of Thorn, when Mara rages against Luke, I think.
Yeah.
But I could be swayed by either argument, but I guess I'll just take it as he pulled an Ulick, which is, it's like poetry. They sort of rhyme.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So I have no problem with that.
And you enjoyed these comic books that you were getting into, Dark Empire, Tales of the
Yeah,
Jedi. Did you
Tales of the
did you
Jedi.
finish off Republic?
No, I still haven't because I've been holding off on it. I want to read Republic and all the prequel comics in one shot, which is by which I really mean when I do a full EU chronological read through.
Right. Yeah.
I will, because the main reason for this is because I want to get the whole multimedia project, and as in the Clonus multimedia project. The only problem with going for the multimedia project alone is that the multimedia project ties into so much content from before that I may as well start from the beginning of the era. And it's not like there's that much content before either. So
Yeah.
I may as well read through the entire expanded universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll pull a Matt Wilkins, I guess. We'll see. If it happens. But
When did you
I'll definitely do it at some point.
and when did you get did you ever get back into the video game side of things? You had started with KOTOR back in the day. You finished off KOTOR and moved on to some other expanding universe video games?
No, sad to say. I never have much time for gaming because
Yeah.
Singapore, Asian school system, you have to sacrifice a lot.
Yes.
And you don't get a lot of things which people in other countries would in terms of free time.
Yeah.
So I never could game that much. I played KOTOR 2 on my iPad when it released on iPads. And I really enjoyed it. I liked it more than KOTOR 1 significantly. My dad likes KOTOR 1 more, but again, I'll forgive him for this one. Mostly because he hasn't replayed it and didn't do it with the sword content mod.
Right.
But I
Prefer
think
KOTOR 2 then?
apart from that, I've only started The Force Unleashed and I never got to finish it. It was on someone else's laptop. I
And-
haven't played Dark Forces, I haven't played Empire of War, haven't played Pod Races, haven't played any of that.
Gotcha. And it sounded like you would take KOTOR 2 over KOTOR.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would sacrifice SWTOR wholeheartedly for KOTOR 3.
Yeah.
I think that SWTOR should have been set in the new Sith Wars era. So Darth ruined all the way to Bane. Because you have a clean slate. You won't need to use the KOTOR characters. You don't even need to mention specific things as canon. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the idea of making sure that everything is firmly chronicled and whatnot. But I think an argument could also be made for keeping a hypothetical KOTOR trilogy as anything could have happened, and the subsequent, like anything referencing the era, is not entirely confirmed because of conflicting reports of it being so long ago, some of it being semi-mythological at this point, so on and so forth. And so you could have no name for Revan and the Exile. And that would really fit the whole thing that they were going with in KOTOR, and even more so in KOTOR 2, where everything is determined by your choices.
Yeah.
Which I think was a really great thing until the Revan novel came along. Unfortunately, that and Annihilation were my first two EU novels that I owned.
Okay. Right.
Before I played KOTOR 2, I liked Revan a lot more. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
But that was also the era when I liked Children of Jedi a lot.
So if you had to point to a favorite character that originated in the expanded universe, where would you point to?
Anakin Solo.
Anakin Solo. And is that influenced by Edge of Victory, by Junior Jedi Knights, by Dark Empire, any combination?
All three and Dark Tide.
Nice. Great stuff with Anakin Solo there.
Mm-hmm. Also, now that I've read it, I hadn't, but now that I've read them, the Crystal Star, of course.
Of course, yeah.
And the praise be to Baruch. And the Corellian trilogy also was really good. I enjoyed the Corellian trilogy substantially more than a lot of other Bantam stuff.
Now, would you say that Anakin Solo is not only your favorite expanded universe character, but favorite Star Wars character in general?
Oh, I can't pick favorites. Yeah, I can't. It's too big for me to pick favorites. Anakin Solo barely wins out on the EU front. And I will admit that is partially because of Legacy of the Force and Jason. So
yeah, how Jason ends up.
Yeah, I think that influenced my choice substantially. But there are a lot of other competitors, and Star Wars is just so big that I can't really pick a favorite. The Wheel of Time was in terms of length. Really 15, but one of them was a prequel and like half the length of the rest, so I call it a half. In Wheel of Time, across these 14 and a half books, I don't have a favorite character.
They're just all that
good. It took 4.4 million words. Yes, it took 4.4 million words. It probably has a world record in terms of number of characters named in a book series. I believe it exceeds 1,000 quite easily.
Wow.
Across that 4.4 million words, and the author literally died while
Yeah.
writing the last book. So Brandon Sanderson, who grew up reading the books, finished it off with a final 3.
And are
Um,
Sandersons generally well received, right?
oh yeah, the Sanderson's ones are excellent. I'm not sure if Jordan's would have been better or as good, or even slightly worse, some argue. But I
Do you
think
think
that
that
it
the
worked out
original
excellently.
author would have respected Sanderson's ones?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that history happened, and I am happy with how it turned out. Would I have been happy if the author had lived and finished it? Yes, but history happened. Sanderson did a great job. The end.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I don't have a favorite Wheel of Time character. And I think if you added up all the Star Wars books, you wouldn't find. Well, firstly, it would be a lot more than 4.4 billion words, like Wheel of Time is.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Significantly, multiple times that.
And
And
if you factored in all the words from all of the comic books too.
yeah, I mean, you have multimedia stuff, which is something Star Wars did better than any other franchise,
Yes.
even without counting continuity. The D&D stuff, which I also read around the same time as I did Star Wars, did a pretty good job in terms of like a sheer amount of content and following a loose continuity, but they focused on so many different parts of the world. It was like some authors picked this area to focus on or this time period to focus on, and they didn't need to care about each other, really connect. But Star Wars did that, let alone Star Wars doing that over multiple mediums, which is unprecedented, and I don't think anything else has come close. But anyway, back to the original point. Yeah, I don't even have a favorite Wheel of Time character. I can't pick a favorite Star Wars character. It's too hard.
Oh, there's too many great ones.
Yeah.
What would your appeal be to someone to read the expanded universe if they've been a Star Wars fan? If they're considering it, what would your argument be for why they should?
The one that I think best on the moral front, or the one that is most likely to succeed?
Just in general, what you think is most likely to succeed?
Okay, most likely to succeed. I present them with all the flaws of the new stuff and say, look, there's all this, it already exists, it's not fan fiction, it's officially published, it's genuinely good. So why don't you just read it if you have nothing better to do with your life?
Yeah.
Uh, the moral argument, of course, will not lean so much on the flaws and of the newer stuff, and just focus exclusively on the good stuff in the EU, which is slightly less effective. Not that it's ineffective, but it's the other argument is more likely to convince people faster.
Right. Yeah.
That said, if I were to give someone Revenge of the Sith and tell them to read it, which I have done before, yeah, they are blown away
Yeah.
every time.
Of course, because
I've
it's
done
a
it
masterpiece.
multiple times by now, actually. Done it multiple times. And
What
it is as it should be. Yeah.
one thing I told Matthew Stover when I got to meet him at Legends Con is after reading Revenge of the Sith, the first thing I thought was this should have been a movie. And then I was like, oh wait. I told him they should have done a movie of his novelization. Which I think is a thought all of us had after putting that book down.
Oh yeah. And that actually reminds me. I read an interview or heard an interview, or at least got the impression of, I think a combination, that Silver wrote the novelization to be complementary to the movie.
Yes.
So the stuff like the final battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin, he doesn't need elaboration. The elaboration is being throughout the rest of the book. The visuals in the movie, he just needs to tie up the knot.
Yes.
While in the earlier bits where you don't have as much in the movie, especially because it got cut, he goes on a lot more, especially in terms of stuff like setup. So you have a
you have a literary experience directly complementary to the visual experience and the musical experience, which isn't something that can be usually done with novelizations. Like the Great Keys Interstellar novelization had to follow the script word for word, even frame by frame at some point, despite what else he had to add to it, I think. I really liked the novelization. It was a really good novelization, but he could have added to it and they didn't let him.
Right.
George, let's go for change dialogue.
Yep.
Which isn't something you usually get.
In fact, George probably should have maybe considered changing that dialogue in the film himself.
Okay, my one criticism for Revenge of the Sith, the novel, is that I disagree with some of the dialogue changes that stole me. Mostly because of the iconic lines. I want to see "So Liberty Dies" with thunderous applause.
Yes. I also believe the "hello there" line wasn't in there.
Yeah, there were a few iconic lines. Okay, "hello there," I can heretically say that I would be fine without. But with others, no.
Yeah.
My one criticism is that some of the iconic lines should have been left in. I wish that George had been slightly stricter for a few of them. But, well, how was he to know how iconic they would become? Even putting aside the pop culture bit, Star Wars had just always had a way of making something iconic without trying. You don't need a pop culture legacy. You don't need memes. You don't need repeated references. It just is so well done.
Yeah.
And it's such a memorable moment in the set piece that it goes down in memory and history.
One thing that you enjoy quite a lot is sword fighting. So, you enjoy quite a bit the lightsaber dynamics to the Star Wars franchise due to your enjoyment of sword fighting, or was your enjoyment of sword fighting influenced first on lightsaber combat?
Just to clarify, do you mean the movies, the books, or both?
Both.
Okay. So my interest in swords arose from an interest in history and an interest in fantasy, but Star Wars doubtless helped with that significantly, because I mean you do literally have heroes with blazing swords.
Yep.
But, yeah, like space fantasy. In terms of my enjoyment, I do have the occasional thought, and I know that there are many people on YouTube in the HEMA community, and that's historical European martial arts, which is what I do in my free time now and then. I know that many of the older people around involved in HEMA have done videos for websites like IGN and occasionally shilled, as was the case of Kenobi, because I strongly disagree. I know that one of them has like more than 20 years of experience, but I strongly disagree with what he said about some stuff. It was very much a shilling attempt. No, he is rather positive overall, but he still has gone on laughing at others. Anyway, so some of these people have been paid by websites like IGN to sort of like critique stuff in Star Wars.
Right.
Like the movie sword fights, for instance, lightsaber fights. And I now mentally have some of the critiques, but that happens to me for other movies, not Star Wars. My main reason being, in Star Wars, you can retcon it. I can mentally retcon.
A lightsaber handles differently?
Not just that, but also stuff like, for instance, in the Phantom Menace, the Duel of the Fates, you have this long shot that opens one section. I think it's like one section of the duel. It cuts away from the other stuff and goes back to the duel. And you have a shot from a very great distance. And if you look closely, you can see that there's actually hesitation because they're taking turns, since
Right.
it's choreography. And at other points, you can see all sorts of other moves that you wouldn't really see in a real sword fight. And my explanation for all of this is the Jedi and Sith have precognition, they have the Force. And so it's also a mind game because they're trying to trick the others into thinking that they're about to do something, but they
Right.
actually do something else. And I mean, always in motion in the future is, right? So even putting aside like painting and such, you can commit to one action and then change it at the very last second. And you might also just wait before you do something so that your opponent might have thought it coming and therefore try to do so and so move to block it, thereby exposing himself, so on and so forth. So the possibilities, in my opinion, are endless. So in Star Wars, I give it a free pass. Shamelessly. I find no problem with giving Star Wars a free pass in this regard. The books, okay, a bit harder, because in books, if such things happen, you would kind of have to write it down in the book. A bit harder to show for that one. So in some books, like I think Black Fleet Crisis or the Corellian Trilogy, I think Black Fleet, there's this training scene of Luke and Leia, and it's pretty lame. It's pretty lame. And I think the New Rebellion had some fights which would have been cool, but some of the descriptions were kind of While if I read, say, Obi-Wan and Anakin versus Dooku in Revenge of the Sith, very different story. So I have a much greater appreciation for the authors who know martial arts and transfer this into their books than the layman. I have a very strong appreciation for such authors, like
Unidark Rendezvous and
Yes.
Age of Victory showcase very distinctly that both Sean Stewart and Greg Keyes know fencing, as in the Olympic type of fencing. And Unidark Rendezvous also told me very clearly that Sean Stewart had done grappling-based martial arts. Revenge of the Sith and actually Revenge of the Sith more than anything else, but Silver's books in general tell me he knows tons of martial arts, especially weapon-based martial arts, that I'm not even going to try to list. And Shadowhunter told me that Michael Reeves knew a bunch of martial arts too.
Yes.
So forth. Like you can tell if you know some of these stuff yourself. And it made me appreciate those authors and those books significantly more.
Because it feels authentic?
Yeah. They managed to capture that feel, even for people who kind of, at least, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, far from it, but I have some idea of what I'm doing. And I know that some of the techniques that they use are valid. And I could theoretically do breakdowns on this on YouTube, but I don't have the time. I know I probably said at some
I'll
point.
get into some questions about that at some point.
Oh no. Oh yeah, like when I was reading Heroes Die, slight tangent. I came across this moment where one character defends herself with two daggers against an approaching swordsman, and Stover describes this whole set piece on how she blocks with one dagger and then brings the other one down on his wrist and then tries to disarm him, and he lets the sword go instead of trying to cling onto it because he's more experienced, and so just knees her or kicks her or something like that. So I tested this out with my instructor.
Oh yeah.
I've never seen this before. I've never seen any of the manuals that I studied because obviously I haven't studied all of them, and I just studied the stuff from Germany in the 14th, 15th centuries. So I don't claim to know every martial arts technique in existence, but I was very curious if it actually worked. So I failed abysmally against my instructor twice. I couldn't disarm him, but then he said, "Let me try," and then I'm pretty sure that if you had a camera, you would have been able to capture this
very astonished look on my face because I'm not sure if Stover actually invented the technique or got it from somewhere, but the biomechanics was sound, and it was done to me by someone who had not even read the book. I just kind of recited the description once or twice, and he got the idea and then did it to me straight away.
That's awesome.
So it really made me appreciate these things a lot.
And appreciate the work as well.
Yes.
And through this martial arts sword fighting appreciation, you can glean new appreciation for the work and kind of understand it a new way. I feel like having that done
definitely.
to you puts into perspective and into frame that event in the story.
Oh,
Which is
yeah, definitely.
really, really cool.
It deepens my immersion in the story because it feels
Exactly.
more real. And while fantasy is escapism to some extent, or at least that's how people describe it, you still have to get attached to the story. You
Yes.
still need to be immersed in it, and that's how you quote unquote escape. And how do you get immersed in it? Well, some like laws of unless it's like a specific thing that so and so law of physics doesn't exist. Laws of physics and biomechanics, so on and so forth, do have to at least somewhat come into play, or at least you have some pseudo-scientific explanation or actual explanation based on whatever magical stuff, fantastical stuff that the author comes up with. And so seeing these things exactly as I would have done them, like Trakata, that technique where you turn off your lightsaber in the middle of the fight and then turn it back on. Michael Stackpole came up with that, I believe, in Dark Tide, which made me forgive him for reverse grip in I Jedi. Many of the sword masters or like HEMA practitioners who have like 20 years of experience, stuff like that, on YouTube have brought up the idea of turning off your lightsaber. So I see these things and then go, the EU actually did it. And there's another one. This is really interesting. I watched someone review the combat in Jedi Survivor.
Right.
He's in charge of the London Longsword Academy or something. David Rawlings, that's his name. And he brought up EU knowledge. So
That's
instead of
so
the
cool.
EU authors bringing up sword knowledge, I wound up seeing a video about sword fighting, coincidentally in Star Wars, but a video about sword fighting where this HEMA practitioner, a well-established one, a very well-established one, just casually brought up Shatterpoint, and as in the novel, and casually brought up cortosis. I think he meant
absolutely insane.
I'm pretty sure he meant ultrachrome.
Right.
But I really appreciate that he knew of lightsaber-resistant materials and brought these things up.
For
Let
sure.
alone that he mentioned an EU book, which made my respect for the man go up a lot.
Now, you mentioned a couple minutes ago YouTube, and you do have a channel with no content on it yet. But if you were to have time, despite the grueling, rigorous Singaporean school system, what type of Star Wars Expanded Universe content would we expect to find at Greyholme's Tower?
Well, I think for the really big stuff, like usually order, you would find video essays breaking down research, which I don't think other people have done before. Secondly, using something which I know, I think one or two other EU readers on Discord who also do HEMA.
Right.
I've run into them now and then, but I haven't run into any on YouTube. So an idea I came up with a while back was to break down the iconic EU duels. For instance, Revenge of the Sith, Anakin and Obi-Wan's Dooku. For
Yes.
instance, Common Horn versus Shidao Shai.
Oh, yes.
Which I think I wrote down some of the stuff, but I never did an in-depth analysis of it in note form or recorded myself. But yeah, in a hypothetical scenario, you would be seeing some stuff like this. Give me a few years time.
Yeah, so hopefully when you have some time, we'll get to see some fight breakdowns
Yeah.
from the expanded universe. Sounds really cool. Very distinct.
Mm-hmm. I was mostly trying to come up with content that nobody else did because a lot of people do reviews and lore videos, and I didn't want to do that sort of thing.
Both you
would
and
you
I are sort of aspiring writers as well. Do you think the expanded universe has influenced that in a major way?
Well, I was coming up with a bunch of story ideas recently. I found myself substantially influenced by Young Jedi Knights and New Jedi Order.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned this to you a while back.
Yes.
And the very first time I tried to come up with like the main ideas behind a series, I think I even wrote out like the plotline of the first book. I didn't want to go back to that because it was very much an amateur's attempt. But I realize now, with extreme hindsight, that because I genuinely did not think of this while I was writing it, that I had a mystic order of magic and sword using guardians get destroyed, and the child of two of them discovers her magic powers,
Right.
and it is eventually guided to defeat some evil.
Sounds somewhat familiar.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine where that's from, which I genuinely did not think of while I was writing it, but it happened. So I suspect, no, I know that Star Wars influences will pop up in my writing. I wrote
Yes.
a play last year, which was for school, but it was very much a passion project, and I spent at least a year on it, if not more.
Wow. Yep.
Including like production and stuff, and I was also having exams, so I couldn't be there for a lot of it, which was very sad. But I wrote it, I directed it, I produced it, I choreographed it. Like all the sword choreography in it came directly from me. We didn't get a trainer. I taught all of the actors how to act. I did characterization of them. I did a lot of things. And in my script writing process, a few things happened. Number one, I wound up with a character having a scene very similar to the scene in Plagueis when Plagueis tells Palpatine the story of, well, the partially fake story, we don't know how fake it is, about how his father died.
Oh yeah.
That sends Palpatine over the edge and makes him kill his own father. I had a very similar scene in that play. I believe I also had a few quotations from Star Wars here and there. I had a scene which was shamelessly inspired by Traitor, Gandalf Weisel's Last Stand.
Oh yeah. It
I
sounds like
had
an incredible play.
a Revenge of the Sith moment. The final duel even had the Revenge of the Sith soundtrack in it, mostly because I couldn't come up with anything better, and the guy who was doing sound had no experience, and yeah, I just sent him a playlist I made, which was largely Star Wars music. If I had known more about Wagner then, I would have included a lot more Wagner. I included a small amount of Wagner and a lot of John Williams.
Very
So
nice.
you had an epic duel between two brothers with some dialogue, not the same, but some lines were very familiar, and their music. So I think that was very strongly Star Wars inspired.
Yes. Now, did the actors do a good job with all of these fight
Oh,
sequences
they did. They really
with
did.
the
I was
choreography and
quite
stuff?
impressed. They did.
And this was like watching proudly watching your children learn a great skill, I'm sure.
Yes, it basically was. Because I had introduced some of them to the school. They were 2 years younger. They were either 1 2 years. So I had introduced some of them to the school. I spent a lot of time with them, teaching them all the basics of drama myself. A lot of stuff about acting, some script writing, characterization, so on and so forth. And of course, I taught them all the choreography because I wrote it all.
Very nice.
So, yeah, it was a very good moment to see it all unfold.
Yeah. I can imagine. So, any final thoughts about the Star Wars Expanded Universe and your journey with it so far before we wrap up?
I think I need to bring up a topic about the so-called future editions, notably supernatural encounters.
Right?
I will be reading it after each other, and I know some stuff in it I will like. I know some stuff in it that I will not like.
Yep.
But firstly, I don't want to get into canon debate, but if it was to take canon in a hypothetical scenario where people didn't like stuff in it, and that was their main reason for taking it not to canon, I would just like to add that all of it is myth, or a good portion of it is myth and disputed historical, not quite fact. Some
Right.
stuff might have happened, some stuff might not have happened. It's up to you.
Yes.
And that is how I will be reading it.
Is Arhul Hextraphon a lunatic? Is he an enlightened individual who saw the truth? That's up to
Or
the
was he
reader.
just partially correct?
Yeah, or did he
most of
see only
humanity-
part of the story?
Yes.
As
Same
someone
with
who's
the other
read,
historians.
as someone who's read most of the story, I'm inclined to believe Arhul personally, just because of how in depth it is and how much sense it makes.
I suspect that I will believe him for most things, but not all. But that's how I'll read it. And I think that it should be a good way to cap off my Star Wars journey before I go on a short break and dive back into fantasy again, which I've been neglecting.
Very nice. Now, I guess I do have one more final question, and then that's in regards to expanded universe continuation. You're someone
yes.
who's not liked all of the expanded universe. You,
No.
you don't think it's perfect by any means, but you have a great love and appreciation for it.
Yes.
What would you argue in regards to why you would like to see the expanded universe continue, if you would like to see it continue? And what are the pros and cons to that? And why overall would you like to see continuation occur, even though the expanding universe never was perfect, and it might not be if it does return? What would you argue for continuation?
Okay. So, firstly, there's a James Wilson video where he listed 2 or 3 types of Star Wars fans. Himself being the second type, who don't take absolutely everything as canonical.
Mm.
Now, I don't really have a fixed view of canon, i.e., I don't really like Legacy of the Force, etc. But I neither refuse to count it or completely count it.
Right.
And I know that there are many people who argue against continuation because they say, "Oh, look, the Jennings is terrible," and "Oh, look, the Disney stuff is terrible." So, if you get this if you get the terrible Disney authors to write for the EU in a continuation, well, then that's a bad thing. You should leave the EU dead in its grave or whatever. And I would like to rebut that. Firstly, said people don't really take the EU as a whole, i.e., they are somewhat selective. If they are not where I am at the moment, they outright don't count them. Disputed stuff like TCW aside, I mean, like, for instance, refusing to accept that darkness happened, or refusing to accept that, say, for some reason, Knight Errant happened, which I think I've seen one person do for some reason. So, if we get a continuation, said people can continue to not count things that they don't like. Right? That's pretty simple.
Yep. Absolutely.
And if for those who have fears of the bad authors, or the ones trying to inject politics which they don't like into the stories that they write, well, so the Disney buyout resulted in a reboot. Firstly, the unofficial reboot of 2013, and then the reboot of the entire. Well, what do you think the main reason for this was? I think we can all agree that there was more than partial out of not wanting to keep track of the law, a clean slate.
Yeah.
I think it most likely that if we get an EU continuation, even if they don't bring back James Luceno for some demented reason, or Matthew Stover again for some demented reason, there wouldn't be to authors who they are writing for. And some of these authors genuinely loved and appreciated you. Take Mike Chen, for instance. His Brotherhood novel was pretty good and did a far better job of linking the Clone Wars movie and factors that I thought physically possible. And he also did so, making sure that Labyrinth of Evil was still compatible with it as another Catherine Morty incident for those who wanted dual canons, and referenced Revenge of the Sith, among others. So he clearly loves the EU. He said as much in interviews. And I think he would very happily work within the established law of the EU and continuation.
Yes.
The same would apply for other authors who work for Disney and write books for Disney, mostly because they like Star Wars. And some of them happen to have liked the EU and are willing to put in the effort to research the continuity and so on and so forth.
So there are some Disney writers who would respect the expanded universe and do their best if they got a chance to write within it. And clearly, I think there are some who would like to write within it.
Yes. And I think that others who don't like the EU because they thought it had so and so political issues or whatever. And well, they wouldn't want to have to be quote unquote restricted by all this baggage that the extra law of the EU brings, which other authors would wholeheartedly embrace, James Luceno or Matthew Stover or Chris Haviland. So the authors who genuinely love the EU would jump at the chance to fight for the EU. They would, I think, do at least a good job. And I haven't read a lot of the new canon stuff, but from what I've been told by people who have, said authors generally are significantly better than their peers. So they won't do a bad job. And the people who would hypothetically do a bad job wouldn't even want to do it to begin with.
Yeah.
So why would that happen? So let's just review the options again. So you could just not count it, especially if you already don't count stuff in the EU. But I mean, if it's all bad, if the new stuff is all bad, well, you could just not count it. What's making you count it?
it's like saying, what's making you not count the EU as canon in Star Wars? Disney? Okay, so a company is going to tell you what you can and can't read, or what definitely happened in a fictional universe.
Yes.
I don't buy that.
Nope. Definitely not.
So you can just choose to ignore it. And secondly, how do you know that it will be as bad as you claim it will be? Because the way I see it, there's much more of a chance for good. And
Yeah.
if I get one James Luceno novel or one Matthew Stover novel, I don't need multiple novels. But if you just give me one, I will take whatever bad stuff comes. I'll ignore
Yes.
it. I don't care. I will, to quote what some of these people might say, besmirch the name of the EU or whatever to have whatever new lousy novel, plural actually, novels, if I get my James Luceno Palpatine novel. If I get my Matthew Stover Han Nuclear Final Adventure novel.
Drew Karpyshyn, Darth
I'll
Sana.
make the trade-off. Yeah. Like, I will make the trade-off. And
Yeah.
I will take my own advice and not care about the stuff that I don't like or I feel are not one of it in the spirit of the EU. So absolutely, we should get a continuation.
You were firmly then in the position of expanded universe continuation.
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely.
But as far as fan continuations go, I would like to add that in lieu of a Disney continuation, I don't see a problem with fan continuations, except that there are too many.
Right.
And if I were to eventually, let's say years down the road, accept a fan continuation, I would be looking at hopefully a unified one with a lot of interconnecting tissue between multiple continuities and multiple authors.
Multiple authors, exactly. Not just one person's vision of what the expanded universe should be, but multiple visions, rather.
Yeah, exactly. Like I immensely respect, say, a Hand of Thrawn for trying to write so much.
Oh yeah.
However, I believe that there are some continuity issues with his work.
Yes.
I disagree with some of the narrative directions taken.
Yes.
So I'm not willing to accept that as the definitive continuation of the expanded universe. Especially if Disney has. Yes, it is extremely admirable. And I respect him immensely for trying. But it's not something that I would take, especially when Disney has said we're never continuing the EU, period, full stop, go away, bye.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten that yet either. So I will hold on hope. And if eventually they do say no, well, maybe many years down the road, after we've tried absolutely everything that we can and we still won't get anything, and assuming that I have that much time, well, I will see what's out there, and I might be convinced to try some of it. If I like it, well, I'll take it as a continuation in lieu, not the same tier, i.e., it would be like an F canon tier.
It would be like how TCW is to the expanded universe, almost.
I personally put TCW a lot lower, so like something like S canon or slightly lower than S canon. In that, if anything of a higher tier contradicts it, well, then it didn't happen. But otherwise, you can assume that it happened.
Yes.
So I would be willing to do that many years down the road, especially if we get a definitive no.
But hopefully, instead,
if some conditions like continuity and such are met.
But hopefully, before that day would arise, we could hopefully get another Luceno novel in the expanded universe.
Before the man dies. Now, he is fit. He is probably the least likely EU author to die an early death, and very much likely to be the latest, but we never know.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I want another Luceno novel before the man dies. Give me that health.
None of the expanded universe None of the expanded universe authors are getting younger, obviously. Time marches on. So ultimately we are running out of time. So hopefully
and
we do
some
get
health conditions too.
Like
Yeah.
Stover used to be in a really bad state.
Yes.
So, I want those stuff before they go.
He seemed to be in great health and great spirits when I had the honor to meet him this last time
Good to
around.
hear. Hopefully, I will eventually get such a opportunity.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me. We've talked at lengths about the expanding universe, obviously. I mean, for the viewers hearing us talk to each other, you might figure it sounds like two old friends, perhaps, who've known each other for decades, talking in some ways, and that's because we spent absolutely just hours talking solely about the expanded universe and other such things. So it's always a
Over the
pleasure.
past year, not multiple years.
Yes, over the past year, correct. But we have spent hours investing in just talking about the expanding universe together, and I think that shows. Thank you for taking the time to do this with me, and I'm sure Greyholme will be on the channel again at some point to talk about something. Perhaps we'll get to the next wave of Essential Legends collection covers.
Oh yes, we will at some point. I think some people can already predict what I'm going to say, but I'll still come back.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's been fun. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on the expanding universe, how you got into it, why you advocate for continuation, and just your overall enjoyment of this amazing feat of media. And for those of you who don't know where you can go to find Greyholme, he's on the Discord server, so you can talk to him there. And he does have a YouTube channel that maybe in 2028 there will be some breakdowns of Corran Horn's battle and other expanded universe duels. There will be some analysis.
Yeah, 2028 sounds good.
2028. All right. Looking forward to it. So thanks for coming on, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.